So we're gonna lap these valves in on this customer cylinder head. We're putting, is that the coarse or the fine?
Coarse.
All right, so the coarse, there's two, right? In this case, the coarse is blue. It's the coarse grade. And then after we get the coarse, in there and we're pretty sure we got good contact, we're just gonna put our finish on it with the fine. So he's gonna put the valve in. He's gonna use his little plunger and listen.
Ooh, that sounds...
Hear the little bit of grindy? So it is, exactly. They're gonna be married after this. So if that valve came out of that spot, where's that valve gonna go when we do our assembly?
This one.
No! Yeah, exactly. Like parts where alike, but especially because we're lapping them together. They're gonna be lapped as an assembly. So we're gonna keep doing the lapping. Right? It'll start to change, then you'll probably pull that valve out and get the lapping compound back on the face of the valve where you really want it. Sometimes it kind of scrapes it onto the edges, but it's not, you don't need more, you just need to kind of redistribute it and put it back in. And you can also see on the port, it'll start to scratch its way in and start to make a good contact. Each valve can take some time. So lapping is one thing, but if we were to actually try to grind seats, we would use either stones as a little bit older style, and the stones we'd need to use multiple to get 3 different angles typically, or maybe 5 for a 5-angle valve job. Or these cutters are like integrated. So some of these cutters will do multiple angles in one shot. If we were to try to cut the valve seats in, we'd bring the head over here. We put it on this machine right here. We'd put the cutter in here and we'd align it and make sure everything is true. And it's got a guide that goes through the valve guide. And this will come down and it'll actually cut a brand new seat into the cylinder head. And I don't know that we have any that we've just done, but I bet you I could find one with brand new seats cut in. So these looked like they were just cut. So you can see this is like, what he's doing is like cleaning up rotors. This is like resurfacing rotors, actually cutting the metal. So these are like brand new because they were just cut by the machine with the 3-angle cutter. So those are new. Or if you guys see these are actual valve seats right here. So if there was something wrong and you had to change it, you could actually drive the seat out and drive a new seat in, especially like an aluminum head. It might have a steel, like a stainless steel or something, seat pressed in, and then you actually use a chisel and you stake it in so it doesn't come out. So like a full-on machine work, they might actually put new seats in altogether. You ready? So the seats are one thing, but let's say it needs guides. These brass parts are the actual guides. So what we were trying to measure, we basically use a caliper or a micrometer to measure the valve stem, and then we'd measure the guide. And if for some reason the guide was too worn out, like the guide was too big, we could actually, in some heads, replace the guide. In other heads, that these are integral, not replaceable, we could knurl the guide to tighten it back up. Or if it was too tight, like we had the valve stem sticking in the guide, we could ream the guide and it'll give you a spec for clearance. So if this right here was 250 thousandths and this right here was 260 thousandths inside diameter, what's our clearance? 10 thousandths would be way too much, guaranteed. So if you were to do that math, that would tell you, hey, we need to knurl the guide or replace the guide. Or if you were to measure the valve stem and find the valve stem had actually worn off, you could need a new valve. But the thing is, that's going to be steel of some sort, maybe stainless, and this is brass. Which one do you think is going to wear? Brass. The guides are going to wear on this one. This is a performance head, though. This is an Edelbrock. This is a nice head. So all this stuff's replaceable because this is like race car head. But on a factory head, like over here, you don't see replaceable guides because they're not probably replaceable. Now a machine shop may have their own special way to replace them, but generally not replaceable. So that's the seats and the guides, and now we're still watching our valves be lapped in. So is that the finish or the course?
Finish.
All right, so when he's done doing the finish, we're gonna do 2 ways to test this. One, we're gonna do the Prussian blue. We're gonna paint a little circle on the face of the valve. Then we're gonna pop it in and see if it makes a solid line all the way around and make sure it's sealing. And then also we'll install the valve, we'll flip it over, and we'll fill the port with some brake cleaner or similar and make sure it holds the liquid. And that's gonna really give us a good indication that it's gonna seal. When we got this, a whole bunch of his valves weren't sealing. It was intake valves, right?
Only in the intake side.
Bunch of intake valves weren't sealing. They wouldn't hold fluid, and they failed the setup. You know, they failed the Prussian blue. So let's just say his valves are pretty good, but let's just say we had a valve that was a lot worse. I'm even going to show you right now how to reface a valve. You ready for that? So we get the valve chucked up into here to reface the valve. And then we're gonna slowly, the way this operates kind of funny, we can bring it over here, start to get the valve to get some lubricant on it. And what I'm doing right now is I'm gonna start bringing the cutter a little closer. Playing around with the lubricant setting here. And I'm gonna bring it in. And I'm gonna attempt to bring it in. And it shouldn't be maxed out. We should be able to move quite a bit further. Yeah, it's gonna make a mess. There's a pig mat. Can somebody grab a pig mat? Alright. Pause, let me get this thing moving good.
Yeah.
Alright, so anybody want to volunteer to operate? We just want to have a chat. So if you guys can't see, get it nice and close. Where you're going to see, I'm just going to slightly engage the valve to this wheel. Very slightly. Oh, we're just about out of room here. Okay, I'm gonna move this over a hair. We're getting close, but we're running out of adjustment. All right, so in the case that we can't get it to be exactly where we want, there's one thing we could do. We could show. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna back the grinder off. So push the grinder away because I couldn't quite reach. So no big deal. Move the grinder back. Sometimes it doesn't return that well. Make sure the wheel stopped. Once the wheel stopped, I'm gonna release the valve and I'm gonna bring the valve a little further in to the chuck. And then when that's further in, I can bring it over. Now it'll be able to touch. So just need a minor adjustment. Get it turned back on. Get the lubricant flowing. Just a little bit more. Just a little bit of lubricant, otherwise it'll spill. And now I'm gonna engage the grinder. A little, how much you guys want to cut off?
10,000.
We're just gonna cut off the minimal amount to make it a smooth, all clean cut. That's all we want.
With thousandths of an inch.
See, hear how it's kind of, the valve sounds like it's a little out of round. It's got a little bit of a funny wear. Alright, so just a little bit. I'm going to bump up the lubricant a little. So this valve actually needed quite a bit of repair. We're going to go nice and slow. Sometimes I'll move the valve around a little. A little more. Hear how it's pretty solid now? I'm going to bet we're pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and back it away nice and smooth. sometimes I have to push it a little. I don't like this. Yeah. Okay. And now I can even pull the valve off the side and then shut it down and then kill the lube. Now we're gonna pop the valve out. Again, don't reach in there with the grinder wheel spinning. I don't like paperwork. I'm not really worried about your fingers. You got 10. You can live with 9. But I don't want to have to do any paperwork I don't like to do. Now, that one, you notice we had to cut that one for a bit. This is the thing. The longer you cut, the more you ruin your margin. So, just looking at this one, the margin on this one is basically gone. So you know what? This valve has a minimum margin spec. We get our caliper, we measure the margin. We find it's probably 0. Guess where this valve goes?
In the trash.
Yonke! But so we just did a valve grind. Now the valve's got a nice new face on it that will engage a nice brand new seat, except the margin's too small. What do you think the small margin would cause if we were to run this? I'll give you a clue. It's kind of like thin rotors, right? This is going to get hot, and then that margin being too small, this valve, you know, I don't know. It depends. I mean, if you were to have a valve with no margin and get it hot, overheat it, or run it lean, maybe no time. Not much time. So pause it. Now, if you guys look really tight and very closely, there's going to be a brand new lapping part right there. It's really hard to see, but if you zoom in just right, you'll be able to see it. See the nice little shiny metal spot? Right about there. Yeah, you can barely see it. So we're gonna clean it up. Did you clean it yet? Who cleaned it? Nobody?
There you go.
Okay, just for a demo, pull that thing away so I don't get some yucky stuff on there. You know, we definitely are gonna wanna clean it up. A lint-free cloth. Like regular paper towels would probably not be the best. And then we're gonna take our valve. Our valve is also gonna be clean. Now, if you notice, the valve's got a nice gray stripe. That's where we lapped it. And that nice gray stripe should match up with that nice gray stripe. And it probably will, because that was a pretty nice lap procedure. So we're gonna do, and this is actually gonna act as Prussian blue for us. Prussian blue is usually a little thicker, so we're making it work here. And we're just gonna paint a little, just a little coating on there. And then, you ready? And this stuff will dye your fingers, so if you wanna look good, go ahead and get dyed. And it gets here, you ready? 1, 2, 3, pop. Then we're gonna pop it out. If I can find it. And then we're gonna look at 2 things. One, we'll get it right over the black. Black will work. So we're gonna go around and make sure, see that little spot right there? It's a tiny little spot. I'll tell you what, I'm gonna simulate a spot. See, I just made a bare spot right there at 12 o'clock. That would be like a, okay, it didn't contact spot. I made that one with my finger. But that's what you're looking for. It should be solid blue all the way around and not have any bare spots. And then same in here, we should see a nice, crisp, clean line in there all the way around. Now, what we found initially was there was little pitting in the seats. Like there would be like little, it'd be blue and then there'd be a little silver spot where the blue didn't touch because it was a low spot. It was a pit. And so that's what we were lapping out. So this one, to me, is looking pretty good. The last thing we're gonna do, clean this, camera back up, clean, wipe, throw stuff around on the ground and everything else. And then what I wanna do on this one, I'm gonna just move a couple things. I'm gonna flip the head over. And that valve was just lapped in right here. So what I want to do, I'm going to hold that valve up. We'll prop it up so we can get a decent angle. I'm going to kind of hold that valve seated. Then you're going to look right in that port at that valve, right there, the shiny one. Anybody got a light? Backup light guy. Okay, so we're kind of looking in there. What I'm going to do right now to test it, pull up on the valve stem, and I'm going to fill. So you can see if I shake it, there's a puddle in there. and we just basically watch for, a minute or even less. I'm looking at the bottom. There's at least it may have been wet from some, but we don't really see anything coming out now, and we're holding up on it. That valve is sealing. So when would you do this? You do this if you replace a valve or if you replace a head. Why would you replace a valve alone? I'll give you a clue. Somebody forgot to do their maintenance.
Keepers.
Exactly. A timing belt breaks, and let's say it bends 3 valves. You don't have to sell them a $2,000 head. You can say, hey, this valve is bent. Let's do these valves, and you're going to have to lap those valves into the old head. Or sometimes I've had where a head is actually damaged, and you can't get a complete head assembly. You may get a bare head and have to lap all the valves in. You may in your career actually lap valves in at the dealership. It does happen. So between that and, you know what, I'm going to move this. Let's go ahead and just let that fluid drain out. It didn't leak, so that's pretty good. The other thing that is pretty common is these valve seals. So these are the exhaust valve seals here. There's actually a special tool to go on and grab those off. You can kind of rip them off. You just got to be careful. And then we would drive new ones on. So some of the symptoms of the valve guide seals bad would be, remember? Big puff of smoke in the initial start, like in the morning or after it's been sitting. So that would be a thing. But remember, if this seal, it could be the seal itself alone, but it may not necessarily be the seal. If you have a valve guide that has excessive wear and a valve stem, and they have too much clearance between the two, that valve walking around is going to make it leak. So it could be worn valve guides or valve seals. And the other thing I was going to say about how to check that, right? We measure the ID with the ball gauge, which we never did find that, did we? Darn it. We'll have to find it later. But you're going to basically slide the ball gauge in. You could do it from either side. It could be upside down. You slide the ball gauge in, slowly expand it till it lightly drags, then take it out and measure the ball gauge with a micrometer, and then measure the stem, and then do the math, and the difference is the clearance. The other thing you could do, if you were especially, a real fake machinist, we could do like what we did with this valve. We could bring it down to here. We could put a dial indicator right here, and we would take this valve and we try to move it left to right. And depending on how much that valve moved left to right, that would tell us the stem to guide clearance. Additionally, you'd get a straight edge, measure this head for warpage using a straight edge, trying to fit the feeler gauge here, diagonally, sometimes this way. You could do the same for the intake manifold ports and the same for the exhaust manifold. Now, if that was messed up, and let's say it was warped, let's say it blew a head gasket between cylinders 1 and 3, and this area here kind of got taken away, like a Prius blowing head gaskets all the time. Typically, if it's blown for a little while, it's fine. But if it keeps blowing gases in between cylinders 1 and 3, or if it was a Prius with a 4-cylinder, it'd be maybe 1 and 2 or something, it could actually wear this spot down. If that were to be worn down, what would the fix be? Yeah, you could replace the head, or you could resurface it on that machine there. So we don't really do the machining in this class, but a machine shop would take it and they'd resurface the whole cylinder head. And so, there's some options. They're only going to resurface the minimum amount. All right, that's your cylinder head lab. Will you remember this when you do the cylinder head lab?